Hello, and welcome to the Coach Right podcast, where we explore how to turn coaching expertise into published pages. I'm your host, Helen O'Neill, Portfolio Career Specialist, accredited Future of Work coach, author and creator of Coach Right 90, the writing programme specifically designed for coaches. You can get the episode show notes and your free guide to publishing options at coachright.co.uk. It's time for the next chapter. Hello, and welcome to episode 1 of the Coach Right podcast. I'm your host, Helen O'Neill, recording on the 6th of August, 2025. Thank you for joining me on this first ever episode. There's a story behind how this podcast came to be, and before we get into today's interview, I thought you might be interested to hear it. I am a word nerd. I dreamed of being a writer when I was little and dabbled with fiction throughout my teens and into my early 20s. It was a dream that never went away, one that I made my first career pivot to pursue back in 2017. My first novel was published a few years later, a mystery novel under a pen name, and I fully intended to live that way for the rest of my days, enjoying my day job and writing fiction in my spare time. The pandemic turned all of that on its head. I lost my creativity overnight and struggled with the new way of working. I began the second significant pivot of my career, retraining as a coach and setting up private practice to support individuals and organisations navigating this changing landscape of work. But something still wasn't right. Building a business is hard work, and I realised that in focusing on the business, I'd stopped writing. I had a little chat with myself. How could I talk to my clients about aligning with their purpose when mine was on indefinite pause? So I decided to put words at the heart of my business. I wrote and published 3 books, the kind of books my clients find useful. And while all of this was going on, I was talking to other coaches and sharing how using my books as my messaging had helped me get rid of that marketing ick. It had filled me with energy and it had enabled me to serve better. And people were telling me that they wanted to do it too. And there were a whole load of these. They didn't know where to start. They assumed they needed a publishing deal. They thought independent and vanity publishing were the same thing. They thought the whole process was going to be price prohibitive, and the list goes on and on. So I decided to do something about that. I founded Coach Right to help coaches turn their expertise into published pages. Coach Right 90 is the writing program designed by a coach for coaches. It launches on the 11th of September, so if you're listening to this in real time, there might still be time to join. And twice a month, this podcast, the Coach Right podcast, is where I'll be joined by the coaching industry's most inspiring authors and going behind the scenes to demystify what it takes to write and publish a book. In today's first episode, I talked to Narinder Sheena, NLP practitioner and chronic pain advocate. Narinder shares how she drew on her lived experience of chronic pain to create a book that's fully aligned to her purpose. She talks about how she adapted her approach to publishing to ensure that her book truly represented that purpose, and she shares about the power of community that she found along the way. She is incredibly generous with her story, and I'm sure you'll get a lot out of our conversation. And here's the show. So my guest today is Narinder Sheena. She's a UK-based coach, educator, author and chronic pain advocate. After 15 years as a personal injury lawyer, she transformed her career to become a full-time coach and the founder of MAP Coach, Mind, Action, Progress. As an NLP practitioner with lived experience of chronic pain, Narinder supports clients who've exhausted the medical system. She's also the author of From Pain to Power, Break Free from Chronic Pain, Your Roadmap to Healing. Welcome to the show, Narinder.
Thank you, Helen, for having me.
You're very welcome. So tell us about you, your coaching practice and your path to publication.
And it's always interesting how I do introduce myself because it's always different. But I'd first of all say that I'm a mother to 2 gorgeous young children. And I am a coach now, and I can fully say that without, hesitating, because I think for the past over 10 years, I'd say, I've always grappled with, what am I? Because I think as a lawyer, we have these different identities, but I think the path to coaching was one of purpose, but of one of reflection as well. And what I do now, like you said and pointed out, is the lived experience of chronic pain has actually empowered me to go forward to help other people heal. And so, I've set up an online pain cafe to help people, but also educate people and get that awareness and understanding. So I coach people who may have pain in their back, to fibromyalgia, to migraines. And what I do is just listen to their story, because really it's not about the pain, it's everything around it. And what I do also is I coach employees who have got neurodiverse traits, might overlap with chronic pain, it might overlap with mental health like depression or anxiety. And I think I didn't know that at the time when I was thinking about writing my book. I think at the time when you heal from something, all you're concentrating on is, wow, I want to share this with the world because I've learned so much about myself and how those nuggets that I learned along the way will help other people.
Powerful story. And how did you come to write your book?
I think when I was in pain, it was back in 2020, just before lockdown, obviously, when I had the first inkling of pain. And I remember down the line, I started reading books. The first book I read was Dr. Sarno, Healing Back Pain. And I remembered I was on every page of those thinking, oh my gosh, this is me. And I think when I started reading more books and more books, I started implementing something which was called a chronic pain tracker. Mm-hmm. And within that, it's like a daily diary, I'd say, where I was sharing my emotions, doing a little small goal setting, and about my wins. And that became something bigger than I had imagined, because I promised myself if I did heal, that I would implement what I was learning along the way with my diary into my book. So the material was already there. And it was about, how do I now create that? And at the time, I didn't think about a book. I didn't think about anything apart from focus on my recovery and my healing. But how do I take that, the paragraphs of that, to then implement that into a book that will help other people?
And how did you go about starting that process from having all of these ideas in your head into actually getting them down on paper?
For me, Helen, I think, we talk a lot about community, but I think for me, community means being with like-minded people who really get that, like that vulnerability, because I didn't know where to start. If I be honest with you, Helen, if I was by myself, I wouldn't have done it. I needed a small group, and I came across Shah Wasman. She was partnering with Ruth Cudsey and Optimus, and I already knew some of the cohort, and I trusted it. It wasn't a case of I've just gone on a whim. I understood, and because I had one of Shah Wasman's book already from years ago, I was like, wow, they do a community support, and they had some writing coaches on that cohort. So I met a few people who were in my group, and when we were sharing about ourselves and what missions we were on, to write our books, it became evident that these were the people that were going to help me, to help that self-doubt, that have I got a book in me? And the first thing was to let everything out, put it on post-its, put it on paper. What is it that you want to talk about? And what is your purpose? What is the reason you're writing the book you are? Yes, we know it's great to market a book, but what is your why?
And what is your why with this book? I know you've done a lot of thinking about that.
I really have. And, I remember I read a lot of books in my pain, a lot. The pain science, the education. But I thought to myself, I was a coach, I was an NLP practitioner who hadn't implemented half of the things I learned in theory into my own life. And I think I had to revisit that. So I wanted to put in the coaching tools that I had learned along the way from my own self-development and incorporate that with what I understood about the pain science, about the awareness and education, because it's all good and well writing my story, but we want to write it where we've got that knowledge and expertise to help other people. And I think having those exercises there, whether people use it or not, and I'm sure, Helen, you can agree, when I used to read self-development books, some of them, we just don't implement the action. The real nuggets are, what are you taking away from? What are you going to action from that? Or we don't even read the book really to the end. So this was going to be different because I wanted to make sure people who have never had coaching before, who have never known of this concept that actually you can do a lot of this yourself, take agency and autonomy. You don't have to keep on going to the medical system, especially if it's confirmed that it's just chronic pain. There's no serious condition, no fractures or, any other serious diseases. But actually, by reading a book was what helped me to implement change. How can it not for somebody else?
Yeah, absolutely. So you found a community and you've got a whole load of Post-it notes with all these ideas. How do you bring all of that together?
I think what I needed to learn was, and I looked at my own healing, where did it start? Where did it really start? Because, you can get fixated on a book title, first of all. I need to have the book title, but actually, no. It's about, how do you want it to flow? How do you want these chapters to formulate? And I went with the chronology of what helped me. And I think you've got to be really understanding of, okay, so how are you going to formulate that? And I think having those coaches on board just to sound out those ideas this is what I want to do, was like, oh, so my 7 steps, it works. And I always went by the awareness and education, because I really think once you've become aware and educate, the rest can fall into place. And I think you can be fixated, oh, is this right? Is this right? But only you will know what the right way is in terms of what do you want the reader to do with this book? Where do you want them to go? What journey do you want to take them on? And I think I had to stop overthinking it as well. And I think having that accountability with others, sounding that out really helped, because I used to have a lot of self-doubt, thinking, but I'm not good enough at this. I can't write like other people can, or can I? And I think this is where, I think if I didn't have that community, would I have finished my book? Would I have had the momentum to have kept on going and being encouraged and seeing other people's progress, probably helping me as well?
Yeah, fantastic. So many places to go from there. I've heard you say before that the first draft is the vomit draft, which I think is just a brilliant way of saying it, and such an empowering statement to sort of remind people that when they are going from that idea stage to that first draft, it's very much do it with the door closed, just get the words out, and you can't edit a blank page, right? So how did you go from getting that first draft into a polished end manuscript?
Yeah, I think one thing I'd always say to anyone who's thinking of writing a book is, don't put so much pressure on yourself as well. First of all, just put it down. And if it's a vomit draft, great, that pressure's off. And I think then the next step to formulate and structure that, again, with the community and the coaching, it's like, okay, so what is the word count you're looking at? Because that's quite important.
Yeah.
And what is it you want to, how do you want to divide those chapters up? What does it look like? We have to sometimes look and ask ourselves those questions. What do we want? Do we want pictures in there? Do we want diagrams? How do we want it to look like? And for me, I looked at, okay, the word count, that helped me. That actually helped me see that there was something to work towards. And then from there, I was looking at, okay, so if I'm looking at, for example, mine is around 30,000 words. Okay, so then the next step is what in each chapter, so what am I looking at? Like, what what am I leaving the reader with? And like I said earlier, every chapter of mine has an exercise at the end. So for me, it was more or less, okay, what can you learn from that and take away? What about the next chapter? And I also wanted to do it in the way that I was learning from the books I was reading. And I actually, strangely, had a woman come up to me in the supermarket on Sunday. And I don't know whether you've seen this, but she came up to me and she said, Narinder, because I knew she had already bought my book, and she goes, I'm rereading your book. And that was the whole basis of why I wrote it, because repetition was a key thing for me when I was reading a lot of these books. And because I implemented the same thing, I was like, this is the reason why, because it's going to help other people to help them in their journey.
Amazing. I'm sure when you're in the supermarket buying your potatoes for the week, it's actually the highlight of the day, isn't it? If someone comes up to you to say they've enjoyed and found your book useful.
And I think a bigger thing is as well, and I don't know if lots of people know this, like one of the things we were asked in that group is actually, what about all the material you put on social media? That's part of your book, part of the marketing anyway that you've already done. And that lady actually, and I'm not a big fan of all the social media platforms, but this one platform, she goes, Narinder, thank you for sharing your value on those, because I've been reading and implementing that. So actually there's so much there to take away that's why a book has to be written, because I think people are going, well, we've not got much to offer, but we have, because we've all got a lived experience of something and knowledge and expertise, that all we need is to refine that and get that support, I'd say, to take it to the next level.
Absolutely. And at the risk of jumping around a little bit, of course, part of the reason of writing a book is for other people to read that book. So you've touched on it just now already, but how do you get your books into the hands of readers?
Another way that I've done this is by going to conferences and I hand them out where I feel like they might benefit from it. And I've done that quite often. I've also did it locally where I live. There's a place called the Wellbeing Tree, and I just pop my books in there because that's kind of where a lot of the practitioners are there to help people who are in pain. And I thought, well, let's pop them in there. But I think it's more than just saying, here I am, I've got a book, and the marketing. It goes deeper than that. You know, I've had people who I say, come to the Pain Cafe, because that's free, it's to attend. But they want to read the book because they need something extra. And I think I went for that same way of thinking as well when I read a book. You want to, if you love learning, you want to learn more about it because you're onto something. There's this light bulb that's giving you that little bit of hope. And I thought, well, if I've got that hope from just reading this book, how many people could have hope from reading my book? So wherever possible, I do hand it out. Some more people will say, we've just bought your book. And it's amazing to hear the feedback, because that, you know, that behind the scenes, it's like they can transform their lives. And I get messages now and again, and they're like, it's really helping us. And I think that's the joy I get from having written that book.
Amazing. So people are always fascinated by the process for a writer. So how did you actually go about writing your book from a process perspective?
Yeah, I think, you know, we were given advice of when's the best time for you. I hear that is one side that you sleep on is a better side. I don't know what the
Which side?
Remember, it's the right, you know, the creative side. But every morning I'd get up at 5, and that wasn't a struggle for me because in my chronic pain, I used to get up at 4:30, which was a real. So I'd get up at 5 o'clock, brush my teeth, and I had no distractions, no social media, no nothing. Get downstairs and I'd write pen to paper. That was my way of doing it, pen to paper, and whatever was coming out for that one whole hour, write it down. It wasn't easy because, you know, lots come up in that time because you're remembering things, you're remembering the emotions that came along with it. And you might sometimes struggle, but I think that was a great way to get me started. And because, I was in a community, you've got that momentum. There were some people that hadn't written as much or some that had gone ahead, but it didn't matter because we were all in it together. cheering each other on and really having that sense of, come on, you can do it. We're with you. We're walking alongside you. And that felt amazing.
Yeah, I can imagine. And which publishing option did you choose?
Well, this is interesting, Helen, because
I have heard this story before. I know it's
and I have to point out here that I was guilty of just listening to hearsay, if I'll be honest with you, Helen. I didn't do all my thorough research first time round. And I went with a hybrid company because I thought they were attached to a more major publisher. I thought, oh, that's it, quid's in. And the only reason I went with them because I wanted to save stress, energy, time. And I thought they knew better than me. So did that. And what I found, and I suppose as a first-time author, it's like my baby. So I'm really nurturing my book and I want everything to be perfect, which, as I know now, not everything in life is perfect. But for me, it was really important to get it right because I'd spent so much mental energy as well as just the writing application. This wasn't just from just that, small time period where I've been with a community writing. It was a number of years in. But what I discovered was that I felt still alone. Like I'd paid all this money and I was still by myself and I didn't get that nurturing support. I didn't feel like I was special in the way that it was done. I understand that obviously when you're doing it in a hybrid, they're not going to do much of the formatting because it's quite what your work is. But even the book cover, I was really surprised that I had to find the stock image and all that was going to happen was going to be the heading on there. So I pulled out at the 11th hour, lost a majority of my money. And I was questioning myself whether I should carry on. I mean, it was that point. And what helped me was I reached out to my business networking community, and they all came back and really good support. And one of my friends, she was like, look, here's a solopreneur. And what I did was actually, my husband suggested this is go to the Alliance of Independent Authors, have a look. So I thoroughly looked at each one in great detail. And there were a few options and I felt more confident to reach out. So I found a solopreneur. But what was interesting is she suffers her own chronic condition. So I thought this is perfect. And I felt safe. We had a Zoom call that felt really authentic. But I also went on another platform as well, online, and I found them to be incredible. And I never say that, but they were amazing. And, I had a designer to do my book cover. And to this day, I'm so proud of my book cover that I think I'm so glad I went through that pain. And again, we've gone from pain to power, where I felt like I had agency now over my book.
Amazing. And I think the website that you found the cover designer was Reedy, wasn't it?
Reedy.
Sorry.
Reedy. And what was interesting is, like when people say, well, who did your, when they review your book, because initially I had my friend, because I wanted to save costs, so I entered the self-employment world. And my friend was a certified copywriter, so that was great. But what I did with Reedsy as well was I was cheeky. I sent it out to all these ghostwriters, and everybody was charging these extortionate prices. And this one guy was like, read over it and said, Narinder, it's well written. You don't need to go to anybody. And funnily enough, he was like a New York's best-selling, author for the Star Wars trilogies. And he invited me to his podcast, and I was like gobsmacked. It gave me that confidence to go out there, let's get your book out there, make a few tweaks, and that's it. And I think when I got my book design cover from a designer at Reedsy, it was like it plucked what I was thinking in my mind and it put it out on paper. And I thought, for that reasonable price, and I think because we don't know, we don't know. And so how do we know what the pricing is like or what we should be looking out for? But I've got to say the second time around, it was cost effective. I felt authentic with the people that I was working with. And they just got it. And I'm so glad. So in a way, weirdly, I'm glad I went through that struggle initially to really understand what I needed for my book rather than just go quickly, let's finish it. Let's get it out there, because it was delayed by a few months. But I'm grateful for that.
Absolutely. It would be remiss of me not to talk about AI, in a conversation about books. So how did you use AI, if at all, in your process?
Yeah, I was encouraged to use AI and I thought it was amazing to use because I'm not great in terms of written structure and paragraphs. And I wanted to use that, but I wanted it as a partner. I wanted it as a strategic partner to help me with any other ideas I hadn't thought about. Because it can get really creative, but it gets creative with what you put in. And I know people will talk about ethics, and you do have to discuss that because a lot of my research was from my own, what I've researched already. It wasn't a case of I'm asking ChatGPT, research it for me. I already knew the material. But I think it's great for helping you break down the content you want to write. But also, as I said, the strategic part of it is having that flow with it as well. But I found it a great tool to use. But I used to put my paragraphs in there just to polish them. But I also had my manuscript reviewed again and again by other healthcare professionals. So I wanted to make sure that, was it in my voice? Was it in my tone? And everybody that's come back and given me feedback saying that's your voice. So I think it's about being mindful of AI. Like, don't just use AI just to get a book out there. Use it with the purpose of what are you wanting to prompt AI to do for you? Is it to structure? Is it for spellings and grammar? So really understanding what you're going to use the AI, but really do your own research because obviously copyright laws, you could be in breach as well. There's a lot of cases out there where they're not going to permit it. And I think when you upload, especially like Ingram Spark, which is, I don't know how to explain it, but obviously it's not Amazon, but it's where the bookstores can buy
It's a book
books in bulk.
distributor.
Yeah. And they will ask that question, has AI been used? Because I think, they won't permit certain books that it's all AI generated. They can pick that up as well. So just be mindful of it, but use it, as a strategic partner, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. And what other tools or technology tips have you got for those that are just starting out on their writing journey?
Oh gosh, well, it depends on who those people are. Like, I coach a lot of people who are neurodiverse. So, if they don't want to write things down, dictate things down. What's the best way that they learn? They might have overwhelm. So I think pick what, there's a lot of software out there. It's just whatever's going to work for you, I'd say. There was another thing that I had was like a timer. It was like a forest thing, and the leaves would drop off if I kept on disrupting myself. But do you need to break down time? If it's not an hour, is it 20 minutes at a time? And when do you work best? Is it evening or morning, afternoon? It's not one size fits all. I think it's personal to you. But again, make sure you get that book out there and not keep thinking about it for the next 10 years.
Absolutely. And I remember as soon as your book was published, the first question I said to you was, everyone's going to ask you if you're going to write another one. And everybody started asking you if you were going to write another one. And now I'm going to ask you the same question. Do you think you'll write another book?
Yeah, I think I love, I used to write articles anyway and blogs, and I'd write things and I'd always have that creative mind. And I think, when we get into the world of work, we forget that. But now, like, I'm working a lot more in the chronic pain and neurodiversity space. I think there's so much there. So I think, there is always another book in us. It's about when are we going to get prompted to do it? Yeah. I think, and it's about, do you take more time on your second time around to write a book, and what support again do you need to do that?
For sure. Amazing. So, other than your own book, what book recommendation have you got for us?
Oh, there were some that I really love. Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle. And I reread it actually in my chronic pain, and it was so powerful. So that's a great book. The Go-Giver by Bob Berg and John Mann. I thought that's such a great one. Obviously, I'm in the business world and networking, and I thought that was a great book to show support for other people. And the last one is a book called All About Love by Bell Hooks. I really enjoyed it. Maybe it's very insightful, and I learned a lot about that book. So those are the three that I've read that I think are great ones. Don't want to give always the coaching type of books because I think we can get so saturated in that. But books that may have a profound impact in your life and to think a bit differently.
It's easy to fall into one particular area, isn't it, when you're reading? But actually, like you say, the growth can happen when you're reading around a topic as well as with depth. So yeah, I absolutely agree. And what's a myth you'd like to dispel, either in coaching or in writing?
I think in terms of coaching, people think you only go to coaching when you're struggling, but actually you don't have to be struggling at all. You know, you can get, I have coaching all the time and I have it on different things because I think it just helps you to think outside the box. Because when you're in that tunnel vision, it's like, oh, I can do that. Oh, I've got that. So I think, yeah, it's not when you're struggling. I think it can be for a number of reasons. So that's one myth I want to dispel.
Fantastic. And what advice would you give to coaches who are listening today who are aspiring to write a book?
Get that pen and paper or dictaphone out and start writing. Start from somewhere, wherever you think that is, just write. And if you got that writer's block, of find the books or people that inspired you, and what was it that inspired you when you read their books as well. I think, you know, people, again, we overthink it, so really start small and then build on that.
That's brilliant. Narinder, thank you so much for your time today. Please tell listeners where they can find you, your services and your books online.
Thank you, Helen, for having me. And hopefully I'm on a lot of platforms, but me and tech. So I have my website's mapcoach.co.uk. My book's on there, so there's a link to Amazon if people want to purchase it. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram as well. So yeah, people can get in touch and happy to support.
Fantastic. And we'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time today, Narinder. That was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Helen, for having me.
Thank you for joining me today. You can get the show notes and your free guide to publishing options at coachwrite.co.uk. Remember to subscribe and leave a review on your podcatcher of choice. Your words can make a difference. A review can too. If you'd like to connect, find me on LinkedIn, O'Neill Helen, that's O'Neill, Oneill, or on Instagram at Helen O'Neill Coaching. I'll see you for the next chapter of Coach Right.